for the gift of life. More importantly, the gift of eternal life and the joy and privilege of gathering together to worship in your name. And so this morning our prayer is that you'd open our hearts and minds anew, that indeed we may receive you anew. Amen. Please be seated. So I'm going to ask you a question, maybe two actually, and I'm going to put them all into one. Have you noticed that the future isn't what it used to be? And if that's not bad enough, have you noticed how much faster you've got to run these days just to stand still? Every day you open your eyes, there's some more change, more technology, more developments. You think, wow, what happened? Who produced them during the night? Was it the fairies? Every day when you think you've dealt with whatever crisis you have to deal with, either personal, corporate, or in the world, another one arrives. We get terribly excited because we can give him a 6-month reprieve from Standard & Poor's. But tomorrow there will indeed be another crisis. And if the truth be known, each one of us just thinks, boy, we need a miracle as a country. And each one of us says, wow, I need my own personal little miracle in so many cases. And for so many situations. I'm not going to ask you today if you need a miracle. I'm not going to ask you if you've needed one before. I'm not going to ask you if you've prayed for one and received it. More importantly, because I'm not that stupid, I'm not going to try and explain to you why you didn't receive it if indeed you prayed for one. What I am going to do is provide some insights into this particular miracle. And indeed, prove to you that all miracles, irrespective, have one common purpose and one common ending. And then you can decide for yourself. And if we look at this particular miracle, it's kind of like a miracle of contrasts. And it is precisely the contrasts in it which remind us, remember I said, I don't know how you feel this morning, I don't know where you find yourself, that remind us that miracles are for anyone and everyone. It is the contrasts in this miracle that make it particularly poignant and powerful. And let's put in context first. We are reminded that soon afterwards, we don't know soon afterwards what? Jesus went to a town called Nain, and his disciples and a large crowd went with him. I'm not sure if it was 80,000 like we were at FMB Stadium yesterday listening to Zoom. To put it in context, you must understand that from Nain to Capernaum was 25 miles, not kilometers. That was an entire day journey, and it says soon afterwards, which meant it was quite a busy day for them to get there. And that's why they came upon this funeral. Because as you know, in those days, you buried your dead at sunset on the same day. And although my Bible says, young man, I say to you, get up, after Jesus had touched the coffin, we must understand it wasn't a coffin as we know today. It was almost like a funeral pyre. It was almost like carrying the young man on a stretcher. There he was, open. So let's understand the background. Then we understand the poignancy and the power, the contrast of this miracle. Because on this day, there were four special meetings which took place. The first meeting was of two crowds gathered, one following Jesus, one following the funeral procession. In both those crowds, two kinds of people. And incidentally, I'll elaborate on this, but in those crowds, we find ourselves in some form or another. Two crowds, two kinds of people. Some alive, but destined to eternal damnation, and some alive and destined to eternal life. In the crowd following Jesus were those who were just amused, curious. What is this dude going to do next? We've seen him do some strange things. There were others that were just inquisitive, on the periphery. I'm not sure I'm in yet. Maybe if he does another miracle, or just another one, I'll buy in. There were those that were just plain cynical, saying, today's the day this man Jesus is going to fail. In the crowd following the funeral procession were folk who were saying, this is it. What's the point of life? It all ends anyway. And in fact, why do I bother? Look at this young man. And in Jewish culture, what did his parents do? What sin did they commit that he must die so young? It's all pointless. It's a bit like sometimes we say about this country, it's all pointless. It's all going down the tube. What's the point? Two kinds of people. Some alive. Some condemned to eternal damnation. Some alive, destined for heaven. I remind you this morning in the words of John chapter 3, verse 36. Jesus says, whoever believes in the Son has eternal life, but whoever rejects the Son will not see God's life and will not see life, for God's wrath remains on him. Two only sons. And 4 special meetings, 2 crowds, 2 only sons. Spot the contrast. 2 only sons, one dead but destined to live, one alive but destined to die. In the crowd, we contrast 2. 2 only sons. 2 sufferers met as well. We had the widow with this procession thinking, what now? I live in a society where I'm marginalized. My only son is dead. Where am I going to go? How am I going to live? For me, life as I knew it is over. The widow, possibly and probably rightly so, not only experiencing grief, but very fearful about the future. Jesus, on the other hand, the man of sorrows, the suffering servant. And I want to remind you about that, because remember I said we see ourselves in so many parts of this miracle. We see ourselves in the crowd. We see ourselves maybe as the 2 only sons. And certainly we see ourselves when we come to God and say, Lord, why me? And God says, why not you? And Lord, why me? Please help. If only you would just do this for me. This is what I do for you in return. And we really feel sorry for ourselves. But spot the contrast of Jesus, who never had reason to feel sorry for himself, but indeed was the man of sorrows. And so I read you, just as a reminder, from Isaiah chapter 53. Who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? To all of us. He grew up before him like a tender root, and like a root out of dry ground. And so often we come to God out of dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him. This is Jesus, remember. Nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by men. And so often when we come to God, we feel rejected, despised, and we say, woe is me, Lord. No one cares. A man of sorrows and familiar with suffering. Like one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he took our infirmities and carried our sorrows. Yet we considered him stricken by God, smitten by him, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. Who indeed had the bigger sorrow. 4 meetings took place that day. 2 groups, 2 early sons, 2 sufferers, and 2 mortal enemies. Can you guess what the 2 mortal enemies were? The 2 mortal enemies that met that day primarily and purposefully out of God's divine providence were Jesus and death. 2 enemies that will fight till Jesus comes again. And we know that on that day, Jesus looks at this funeral party and he is filled with compassion. And he reaches out and he touches the coffin, and I told you it's not the coffin he touches, it's the young man himself. He transgresses every social rule. He does everything wrong that day. You just don't go around touching dead people. And we know he touches and he breathes new life, and he says to the young man, get up. And isn't it amazing? The young man immediately starts speaking. And I believe he probably never stopped. And so let's go back to this miracle. You say, well, where does it leave me? Where does it leave me in my journey? Well, I'll tell you what actually it challenges you to do. Because somehow we tend to find ourselves not necessarily experiencing God's fullness and really being plagued by life and not experiencing the miracles that we would like, because we live somewhere in between career and calling. Now, remember I said so many familiar faces, and many of you would say, well, I'm past career. What are you talking about? Well, I'll tell you what I'm talking about. Do you know the difference between a career and a calling? A career, or in this case, it could be a hobby or an interest, is something that becomes your God. Whereas your calling is something you do for God. And it's only when we are rooted and established in our calling. And you say, well, I'd love to be, but I don't know what it is. Man, that's cop-out. It's a bigger cop-out than encounter. What do you enjoy doing? What do you do best? When and what are you doing when you're at your happiest? When people say to you, wow, there's something about you, what are you experiencing? What are you saying? Because let me tell you, whatever it is, that's what you can do for God, and that's your calling. Doesn't need power, doesn't need status, isn't inhibited or promoted by age, and it doesn't care about gender. Because when we know what our calling is, we are able to ask 3 very important questions which just propel us forward in our faith journey. 3 simple questions. And interestingly enough, they come from the business world. You see, the world has finally understood that MBAs are wonderful, particularly for the institutions who provide them, because if you want to do a Harvard MBA these days, I hope you've got 5 million rand. Forget about long-term, short-term, or even medium-term planning, because life changes too quickly. I said that. You know, even when you go to the pet shop, even the hamster's on steroids, because otherwise it can't deal with the treadmill. 3 simple questions which apply in the business world, but much more profoundly in our spiritual journey. And we need to ask ourselves, and I'll conclude after that, and see where I'm going. What do I need to stop doing? What do I need to start doing? And what do I just need to continue to do well as my God-given calling? What I need to stop doing, it might be things I say, it might be my attitude, it might be my actions, it might be my stubbornness, it might be my lack of generosity, it might be my unwillingness to serve. What do I need to start doing? Each one of us is in a different place. And I firmly believe when we answer those questions and practice them, I still will not be able to guarantee you the miracle you desire or pray for. But I will make you this promise. You will become the miracle. And I don't believe that's a poor saying. In fact, I believe with the Olympics coming up, that's an absolute first and a goal for the world. My friends always tell me, you wear me out. I say, well, that's okay. Actually, I wear myself out. They say, you can't change the world. It's impossible. I look at them and I say, clearly you're at a school where they only had maths lit. Because if you think about it, your job is not to change the world. It's merely to change one person's world. And if each one of us did that, we'd run out of people to change eventually. As you strive to be the miracle, you will experience the miracle, and you will become the miracle, not only for yourself, but for the world. And in so doing, trust me, this world will change. Bless each one of you. I'm going to say it again. It's good to be back. Amen.